We met before. You just don't remember. The mysterious Mafia boss that swears she loves him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was the kind of morning that felt like it had started hours too early. Elena Harper stood in front of the mirror, running a hand through her disheveled brown hair, trying to steady her thoughts. She had just turned 28, and yet there were days when it felt as if she had already lived an entire lifetime. Her shift at the hospital had been exhausting, and now, with her work clothes still clinging to her body, she was heading to a coffee shop for a much-needed break. As she stepped out into the cool, early morning air, something about the world felt different. Maybe it was the chill in the breeze or the way the city hummed with life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. She walked briskly toward the coffee shop, her mind racing as she thought about her life, the people she knew, and the city that had been both her home and a constant reminder of what she had lost. She had no family left, no one to go home to after a long day. Her parents had died years ago, and the only family she had now was her memories. But as she entered the coffee shop and stood in line, the moment she glanced up, something stopped her. Her heart skipped a beat, and her breath caught in her throat. There, standing by the counter with a cup of coffee in hand, was a man she hadn't seen in years. His dark eyes met hers, and a jolt of recognition shot through her chest. It wasn't just that he was handsome, though he was strikingly so, but there was something about him that felt familiar. She tried to place him, but her mind refused to cooperate. She hadn't seen him in years, and yet, here he was, standing in front of her as if time had not passed at all. The air around them seemed to thicken as he stepped closer, his presence undeniable. "Elena," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying with it a weight of authority that made her feel small, insignificant. "I know you don't remember me, but we've met before. We shared something you've forgotten." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She blinked, trying to make sense of what was happening. This man, this stranger, was claiming they had met before. But how could that be? She had never seen him before in her life. And yet, there was a feeling deep inside her that told her there was more to this encounter than just coincidence. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart pounding in her chest. He smiled, a small, knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You'll remember eventually. I'm not just anyone, Elena. I'm someone from your past, and I'm here to claim what's mine." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with the promise of something dangerous. Elena's pulse quickened as the man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. She couldn't deny the pull, the strange sense of familiarity that tugged at her from deep within. But she couldn't understand why he seemed so certain. Why was he so sure that she had forgotten him? And more importantly, why was he so certain she was meant to be his? Elena stood frozen in place, the cup of coffee in her hand trembling as the man before her watched her intently. She couldn't shake the feeling that she knew him, that she had known him for a long time. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, the memories wouldn't come. His presence was overwhelming, filling the space between them with a magnetic force that made it impossible to look away. His gaze was steady, unblinking, as if he could see right through her. "You really don't remember, do you?" he said, his voice smooth, almost velvety, but there was something dangerous in it. "Not even a little?" Elena swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. "I don't know you," she said, her voice weak, though it was hard to believe her own words. There was something about him that felt so familiar, so right, and yet it made her skin crawl. He stepped closer, the heat of his body radiating towards her. "You will," he said, his lips curving into a smile that sent a chill down her spine. "In time, you'll remember everything. And when you do, you'll understand why you belong with me." She recoiled slightly, instinctively taking a step back, but he followed, his presence suffocating. "Who are you?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, his eyes dark, almost black, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something behind them, something that was both cold and passionate. "My name is Dante," he said, his voice lowering. Dante Moretti. And you? You are the woman I've been looking for. Elena felt the world around her spin, her thoughts racing. Dante Moretti? She had never heard that name before, but somehow, it felt like it was important. Why? Why are you looking for me? She asked, confusion and fear mixing in her chest. He paused for a moment, studying her with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her. Because, he said, stepping even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, you are the key to my past. To everything. And you've forgotten me, Elena. But I won't let you forget again. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to escape the strange and frightening pull he had over her, but something inside her, some deep, unexplainable part of her, held her there, unable to move. She glanced around the coffee shop, suddenly aware of the people watching them. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice cracking. Dante's eyes softened, though there was still an edge of determination in them. You don't have to remember right now, he said, his tone gentle, almost reassuring. But I'm not going anywhere, Elena. You'll see. Soon, you'll remember everything. The room seemed to grow colder, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know why, but she felt as though she had no choice. He was right. She couldn't run from this. She didn't know who he was, but the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, she felt as if she had no control over the situation. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to make sense of it all. But before she could say anything else, Dante reached out, gently taking her hand. His touch was firm, but not harsh, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Come with me, he said, his voice soft but commanding. Elena hesitated, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was that same intense look, that same certainty. I don't know what you want from me, she said, her voice shaking. You want me to remember something that I don't even know. Dante's expression softened, and he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. You'll remember, Elena. I'm not asking you to understand everything now. I'm just asking you to trust me. Trust that I'll be here when the memories come flooding back. She wanted to refuse, wanted to pull away, but something deep inside her told her to stay. Something told her that leaving would be a mistake. And so, without fully understanding why, she nodded. Okay, she said, her voice barely audible. I'll go with you. Dante smiled, his eyes lighting up with something that almost looked like relief. Good, he said. You won't regret it. He led her out of the coffee shop, and as they stepped onto the busy New York street, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in a way she couldn't yet comprehend. The city around them seemed to blur, the noise fading into the background as she focused on the man beside her. Dante Moretti. The name felt foreign, but it also felt important. And no matter how much she tried to resist, Elena couldn't deny the strange pull she felt towards him. She didn't know what was happening, or why, but one thing was clear. Her past, her present, and her future were all intertwined with this man in a way that was impossible to ignore. They walked in silence for a few moments, the distant hum of the city filling the air around them. Elena felt the weight of Dante's presence beside her, his aura undeniable, like a force of nature that she couldn't ignore even if she tried. They crossed the street, and despite the usual chaos of New York City, everything around her seemed to fade. It was as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them, moving in a rhythm she couldn't understand but felt compelled to follow. Elena couldn't help but feel that she was about to step into something much bigger than herself. Her mind kept spinning with questions. Who was Dante Moretti? Why did he say they had met before? And what did he mean by "you belong to me"? She had never been the type to fall for smooth talkers, but there was something about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her heart race in ways she couldn't explain. Where are we going? She asked, her voice breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Dante glanced at her, his lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You'll see soon enough, he replied cryptically, his tone smooth as silk. Trust me, Elena, the answers will come. But first, you need to understand something. You're not like the others. You were never meant to be. Elena furrowed her brow, confusion settling deeper. What do you mean? She asked, feeling an unsettling sense of foreboding creep over her. Dante paused for a moment, as if carefully considering his next words. You are part of something much bigger than yourself, he said finally, his voice low, almost reverential. I know it's hard to believe, but you were always meant to be a part of my world. It's in your blood, Elena. You just don't remember yet. Elena stopped walking, her feet frozen to the pavement. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know anything about that world. I'm just me. I've been living a normal life, and Dante turned to her, his eyes intense, pinning her in place with a look that felt like it was cutting through her very soul. That's the thing, Elena. You've been living a lie. Your life, your past, it's all been a mask. You were meant to remember, and now you will. He took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. His touch was firm but comforting, grounding her in a way that made her heart flutter against her chest. You think you're ordinary, but you're far from it. You've been running from your past for too long. But it's time to face it. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll understand your place in this world. In my world. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. His words felt like they were echoing in her head, making her feel dizzy. She took a step back, pulling her arm away from his touch, though she knew, deep down, that it was futile. No, she said, shaking her head, trying to hold on to some semblance of control. This doesn't make sense. I'm not a part of some mafia world. I'm just a therapist. I don't know anything about what you're talking about. Dante's eyes softened for a moment, and he let out a small sigh. You still don't remember, he muttered under his breath, as if to himself. But you will, Elena. You will. He looked back at her, his expression turning serious. You're going to meet some people today, people who can help you remember. And once you do, you'll understand why I had to find you. Elena shook her head again, trying to push back the panic rising in her chest. I don't want any part of this, she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. I just want to go home. Dante's face hardened for a moment, and Elena flinched, but he quickly softened again. You don't have a home anymore, he said quietly, almost gently. Not the way you think. Once you remember, once you see the truth, you'll understand why you're here. Why I'm here. Elena stood there, frozen, her mind racing. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The rational part of her mind screamed at her to turn around and run, but something deep inside her kept her rooted to the spot, unable to move. Dante was right about one thing. She didn't have a home anymore. The life she had been living felt like a lie now, like it had all been a dream that had started to unravel. As they continued walking, the familiar streets of the city seemed to blur around her. She had no idea where they were going or what would happen when they arrived, but she knew that whatever came next would change her life forever, and there was no turning back. As Dante led her through the darkened streets, Elena's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The city seemed to close in around her, the towering buildings, the endless streams of cars, the bright lights. All of it felt distant, as if she were moving in a dream. Or maybe it was more like a nightmare, one she couldn't wake up from. She had no idea where they were going. Only that Dante's presence was like a constant pull, guiding her forward despite her growing unease. She could feel his eyes on her as they walked, the weight of his gaze never leaving her. Where are we going? She asked again, her voice small and uncertain. Dante glanced at her, his expression unreadable. You'll see soon, he replied, his voice calm but firm. It's time for you to understand who you really are. Elena swallowed hard. I don't understand. I'm just a therapist. I have no connection to whatever world you're talking about. Dante's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll understand soon enough. Everything you've been told about your life is a lie. You were never just a therapist, Elena. You were always meant for more. You just didn't remember it. Elena shook her head, trying to clear the confusion from her mind. This doesn't make sense. I don't know what you're talking about. My life, my past, it's all normal. Dante stopped suddenly, turning to face her. His eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. No, Elena, your life was never normal. Not when you were born into this world. Not when you were part of something bigger. But you've forgotten. I'm here to help you remember. His words hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment, Elena could barely breathe. What was he talking about? She had always been ordinary, always lived a simple life. She couldn't remember anything extraordinary, nothing that would connect her to whatever dark world Dante was referring to. But his gaze, the way he spoke, it made her question everything. I don't want any part of this, she said, her voice shaking. I don't want to remember. I just want to go home. Dante took a step forward, closing the distance between them. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. His touch was warm, but it held an undeniable strength, a power that made her feel as though there was no escape. You don't have a home anymore, he said. Quietly. Not the way you think. Your real home, your true purpose, is with me. And you can't run from that. Not anymore. Elena felt the weight of his words settle into her chest like a heavy stone. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. She wanted to argue, to push him away, but there was something in his eyes that stopped her. Something that made her believe that this man, this stranger, knew something she didn't. He seemed so sure of himself, so certain that she belonged to him. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante smiled again, though this time it was a little softer, as if he understood the fear in her eyes. I want you to understand who you are, Elena. I want you to remember your past, your family, and why you were taken from this world. Elena's mind raced. Taken from this world? What was he talking about? I don't remember any of that, she said, her voice rising. I don't even know who I am anymore. You're just some stranger telling me things that don't make sense. Dante's eyes softened for a moment, but the intensity never left them. I'm not a stranger, he said quietly. And you're not the person you think you are. Your past is more than you can imagine, Elena. Your life has always been connected to mine. It's why I had to find you. He turned away from her, walking a few paces ahead before glancing over his shoulder. Come with me, he said. It's time for you to see the truth. Elena hesitated, her heart racing. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to escape from this man and his promises of a past she couldn't remember. But despite the fear, something deep inside her, a feeling she couldn't explain, kept her moving forward. She had to know. She had to understand. Slowly, she took a step toward him. What happens if I don't want to know the truth? She asked, her voice trembling. Dante stopped, turning to face her with a hard, unreadable expression. Then you'll never know who you really are, he said. And that's not a life anyone should live. Elena felt her throat tighten. She didn't know what to do. She had never felt so out of control, so vulnerable. But with Dante, there was no turning back. There was only the truth he promised her. She followed him, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. Elena followed Dante in silence, her footsteps echoing against the cold pavement as they moved through the empty streets. The city, usually vibrant and full of life, now seemed distant, as though it had fallen into a deep slumber, leaving only the two of them in this strange, tense moment. Dante walked ahead with a purpose, his movements steady and confident, as if he knew exactly where they were going. Elena, on the other hand, was filled with a growing sense of unease. She had no idea where they were headed or what was going to happen when they arrived, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had known about her life was about to be turned upside down. She tried to calm herself, but her mind was racing with questions. What did Dante mean by your true purpose? Why was she so important to him? And why did she feel like her entire existence had been leading up to this moment? She glanced over at him, his face set in an expression of quiet determination. Despite her fears, there was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in even as she fought to pull away. How do you know all this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. How do you know who I really am? Dante didn't look at her as he spoke, his focus straight ahead. I've been watching you for a long time, Elena, he said quietly, his tone low and steady. I knew you before you knew yourself. Your past is complicated, but I've always known you would find your way back to me. Elena felt a chill run through her. Watching me? What do you mean? I don't even remember you. I've never seen you before. That's the problem, Dante said, his voice turning almost sympathetic. You don't remember because you've been kept from the truth. Your mind was wiped clean, Elena. Your memories erased. But it was always meant to be this way. Elena's heart raced as she processed his words. Memories wiped clean? Erased? She had to be hearing things. She couldn't remember a single moment of her life that felt fake or manipulated. But as she looked at him, something in his eyes, something deep and knowing, told her he wasn't lying. What are you saying? She whispered, almost afraid to ask. You're not just a normal person, Dante continued, turning to face her, his expression now more intense than ever. You were born into this world, Elena, into a world that was always meant to be yours. The world of the Mafia, the world of power, wealth, and influence. Elena shook her head in disbelief. No, I'm not like that. I'm not like you. Dante's eyes darkened slightly, but his voice remained calm. You don't remember, but you are. You've always been a part of it, Elena. Your father, your real father, not the man who raised you. He was part of it too, and you were meant to take his place. Elena recoiled, stepping back as if the words themselves had burned her. What are you talking about? My father, he's dead. He was a construction worker. He had nothing to do with this. Dante's gaze softened for a moment, and he took a step closer to her. That's what you've been told. That's what they wanted you to believe. Your father was a part of something much bigger. He was the one who kept you hidden, kept you from remembering what you truly were. But now, it's time to face the truth. Elena backed away, her mind spinning. I don't want this. I don't want any of it. I just want to live my life. I just want to be normal. Dante's expression hardened, and for a moment, his usual calm demeanor slipped, revealing the power he held within. Normal, he repeated, his voice low. You were never meant to be normal. You were meant to rule, Elena, to be the queen of a world that's been waiting for you. And whether you want it or not, you're going to have to accept who you really are. Elena's chest tightened, the weight of his words pressing down on her like a heavy stone. She didn't know what to say, how to react. Everything he was telling her felt impossible. It was like a dream, a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. But the more she looked at him, the more she realized that this wasn't a dream. This was her reality now. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I want you to embrace your destiny, to take what's rightfully yours. The power, the wealth, the control. All of it. It's time for you to remember who you are and step into the role you were always meant to play. Elena felt a knot form in her stomach. She didn't know if she could do what he was asking. But somewhere deep inside, a part of her knew that she had no choice. The truth was out there, waiting for her to find it. And with Dante by her side, she would have to face it, no matter how terrifying it was. I'll never be like you, she said, her voice shaking with defiance. I'll never be a part of this world. Dante's lips curled into a small, almost sad smile. You already are, Elena. You just don't know it yet. But you will. And when you do, everything will change. Elena stood in the hallway, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what Dante had just said. The words echoed in her head, but they didn't feel real. A part of her wanted to run, to escape this terrifying reality he was dragging her into. But another part of her, one she couldn't deny, felt drawn to him, to the mystery that surrounded him, to the world he claimed she belonged to. Dante led her through the building, his stride confident, his presence commanding. They passed through a pair of massive double doors, and Elena was hit with the overwhelming scent of old wood and polished leather. The room they entered was grand, much grander than any place she had ever been. It was luxurious, but dark, with heavy curtains that blocked out most of the natural light, casting the room in shadows. There were antique chairs and long tables with intricate carvings, and the faint glow of dim lights flickered from the walls. Elena took a deep breath as she stepped into the room, her heart racing. The feeling of being out of place, of being overwhelmed, was starting to consume her. Dante, however, moved with ease, like he owned the space. He turned to face her, his gaze intense, but there was something else in his eyes now, something that made Elena feel like she was being pulled into something much deeper than she could understand. This is where it all begins, Dante said, his voice calm, yet laced with authority. This is where you'll learn who you really are, where you'll understand your role in this world. Elena swallowed hard. She felt small in the presence of this man, but there was something magnetic about him, something that made her hesitate before rejecting him completely. I don't want to be part of this world, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. Dante gave her a look that was almost pitying, his lips curving slightly. You don't have a choice, Elena. You were born for this. It's in your blood. Your father, my connections, everything. It all led to this moment. Elena flinched at the mention of her father. My father had nothing to do with any of this, she protested, her voice shaking. He was a regular man. Her voice trailed off. Her mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts, and the more she tried to make sense of it, the harder it became to believe what Dante was saying. Dante stepped closer, his presence looming over her like a shadow. That's what you were told, he said softly, almost as if explaining something simple. But your father wasn't just any man. He was connected. And you are his legacy. You are my legacy. Elena recoiled, stepping back instinctively. I don't want to be part of your legacy, Dante. I don't want any part of this life. Dante's eyes darkened, the smile vanishing from his face. You will, Elena. You'll come to see the truth eventually. But for now, all I need you to do is trust me. Trust that I'm doing this for your own good. Elena felt a wave of frustration rise in her chest. I don't even know you, she snapped, her voice rising. How am I supposed to trust you? Dante didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. Because you know deep down that this is who you are, he said, his voice low and commanding. This is where you belong. And when you're ready, you'll accept it. But not until you remember. Elena felt a sharp pang in her chest at the mention of remembering. She had spent years trying to forget, trying to escape the painful memories of her parents' deaths, of the life she had left behind. And now Dante was telling her that everything she had believed was a lie. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. I don't even know what you want from me, she whispered. I'm not part of your world. I'm just a therapist. I help people. That's it. That's all I am. Dante's expression softened for a moment, but his words were still laced with determination. You are so much more than that, Elena. You're not just here to help people. You're here to take control, to lead. And I'm the one who's going to make sure you're ready for it. Elena opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, Dante's voice cut through the air again. We'll start small, he said, his tone almost reassuring. But every step you take from now on will bring you closer to the truth. You'll remember who you are, and when you do, everything will change. Elena looked around the room, feeling trapped. There was no escape. Dante had already made it clear that she wasn't going anywhere. Her life was no longer hers to control. But as she stood there, her mind still racing, she realized one thing. No matter how hard she fought, no matter how much she wanted to deny it, she was already in too deep. The world Dante had pulled her into wasn't going to let her go. Elena walked silently beside Dante, each step heavier than the last. The weight of his words from earlier still pressed against her chest, suffocating her, as if the air itself had turned dense. She couldn't escape the image of the grand room they had just left, the dark, luxurious space where Dante had revealed the impossible truths about her family, her past, and who she really was. Her mind was still reeling. She had tried to push everything away, to deny what he was telling her, but there was something in his voice, something in the way he looked at her, that made it impossible to dismiss. He believed it, and she feared that, somewhere deep inside, she was starting to believe it too. They arrived at a large, iron-gated mansion, its stone walls towering high above them, casting long shadows across the grounds. The front of the house was grand, with sweeping steps that led to a massive wooden door, polished and ornate. Two men in black suits stood guard by the entrance, their eyes cold and calculating as they opened the door for Dante. Elena stood frozen for a moment, staring at the intimidating structure. She had never been in a place like this. It was like stepping into another world, one that didn't belong to her, but one that Dante seemed to have created for her. Come on, Dante said, his voice soft but firm. This is where you belong, Elena. You've always belonged here. The words made her stomach twist. She didn't know what he meant, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. With a deep breath, she followed him inside, walking through the door and into the unfamiliar world that awaited her. The interior of the mansion was just as grand as the exterior. The floors were marble, gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers, and the walls were lined with paintings that looked centuries old. The air smelled faintly of leather and polished wood, a scent that felt both comforting and foreign at the same time. Welcome to my home, Dante said, his voice almost gentle now, but there was still that same underlying force in his words. You will learn everything you need to know here. Elena didn't know what to say. She wanted to argue, to ask him what exactly was going on, but somehow, she knew that it wouldn't change anything. She had already crossed a line she could never uncross. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why me? Why now? Dante turned to face her, his dark eyes narrowing as he looked at her with a mix of sympathy and something darker, something dangerous. Because you're mine, he said simply, his tone heavy with meaning. You've always been mine, Elena. And now, it's time for you to remember. The words hit her like a punch, and she took an involuntary step back. I don't belong to you, she said quickly, though even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. There was something in the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her feel like she was already caught in his web. You do, he replied, stepping closer. You always have, and you will understand that soon. When you remember, when you finally see what's been hidden from you, everything will make sense. Elena shook her head, trying to push back the sense of dread that was rising inside her. I don't want any of this, she whispered, her voice shaking. I just want to go home. Dante didn't flinch. He merely smiled, though it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who knew something she didn't. You don't have a home anymore, he said, his voice soft but firm. This is your home now, and you will learn to accept that. He reached out, taking her hand in his grip gentle but unyielding. I'll give you time, Elena. Time to understand. But you need to start trusting me. Trust that everything I've done is for your own good. Elena wanted to pull her hand away, wanted to scream at him, to run as fast as she could. But for some reason, she couldn't. She couldn't bring herself to do it. She felt trapped. I don't know how to trust you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Dante's expression softened for a moment, and he cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing against her cheek. I know this is hard for you, he said quietly, but you're not alone. You never will be again. His words were strangely comforting, and for a moment, Elena felt her guard slip. But then the reality of everything he had said hit her again. What is it you want from me? She asked, her voice trembling. I want you to remember who you are, he said, his voice unwavering. I want you to take your place in this world, the world you've always belonged to. And when you do, you'll understand why I had to find you. Elena felt a wave of emotion hit her, and for a brief moment, she was on the verge of tears. She had no idea what to believe anymore, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was no longer her own. It had been claimed by Dante Moretti and the world he had pulled her into. And now, there was no way out. The days blurred together as Elena found herself drawn deeper into Dante's world. The mansion had become her new reality, its marble floors and ornate furniture no longer seeming strange, but an inseparable part of her life. She had once been an ordinary woman, a therapist with no ties to power or wealth, but now she was surrounded by men in black suits and whispered conversations in languages she couldn't understand. The weight of her new life pressed on her, but she could not escape the pull of the man who had brought her here. Dante had insisted that she trust him, that she would understand everything in time, but with each passing day, Elena felt the chasm between what he was saying and what she could grasp only widening. He would explain things in pieces, like fragments of a puzzle, and though she could see the picture starting to form, it terrified her. Dante had told her she was meant for something more, something important, and that it was her destiny to join this hidden world. But Elena didn't feel ready. She didn't feel like she was part of any of it. But as the days passed, she began to understand that she had no choice. One night, as she wandered through the mansion's grand hallways, Elena found herself standing before a large, ornate door. She had seen it many times before, but had never been allowed to enter. Tonight, however, there was something different about it, something that made her heart race. She glanced down the hall, as if to make sure no one was watching, and then, with trembling hands, she pushed the door open. The room inside was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a private study, dimly lit, filled with bookshelves that stretched to the high ceiling, and the scent of aged paper hung in the air. At the center of the room was a large, dark wood desk, papers scattered across it. But it wasn't the room's appearance that made Elena's breath catch. It was what lay on the desk. A set of documents, old and yellowed with age, sat there, open, as if waiting for her to look at them. Her fingers brushed the pages hesitantly, as if touching them would somehow awaken something buried deep inside her. The first page caught her attention, a family tree, but not her family. It was the Moretti family tree, and there, at the top, was her name, Elena Harper. The letters seemed to jump off the page, burning into her mind as she scanned the names surrounding hers. Her father's name was there too, but under it, it said deceased. And beside his name was another name she didn't recognize, Giovanni Moretti. The connection was unmistakable. Her father hadn't just been a construction worker. He had been part of the Moretti family, part of the Mafia. She dropped the papers in shock, stepping back as if they might burn her. But the truth was undeniable. Everything Dante had said, everything she had tried to dismiss, was now in front of her, written in black and white. "You shouldn't be here," a voice behind her said, making her jump. She turned quickly to see Dante standing in the doorway, his eyes dark with something unreadable. He hadn't spoken like that in days. There was no comfort in his tone, no reassurance. Just cold command. I didn't mean to snoop," Elena stammered, her heart hammering in her chest. I needed to know." Dante stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't speak for a long moment, then finally said, "I told you that you needed to trust me. What you've just seen, what you've just learned, it's only the beginning." Elena's head was spinning. "What does this mean? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to," he said quietly. "But you weren't ready. You didn't want to remember. I had to wait until you were." Elena took a step back, her mind reeling. "I didn't want this. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted a normal life. I don't belong here. I don't belong in your world." Dante's expression softened, though his gaze was still firm. "You do belong here, Elena. This is who you are. Who you were always meant to be." He reached out, gently placing his hand on her arm. "You can fight it. You can try to deny it. But you'll only hurt yourself. The sooner you accept it, the sooner you can take control of your life again." Elena looked at him, her body trembling with emotion. She wanted to fight back. She wanted to scream that this wasn't her life, that she wasn't ready to step into this world of power and violence. But deep down, she knew he was right. This was her world now. She had no choice. "What do I do now?" she whispered. Dante smiled softly, his fingers brushing against her skin in a gesture that was almost gentle. "Now, you're going to take your place. You're going to learn everything about this world, about the Moretti family, and about what it means to rule. And when the time comes, you'll make the decisions. You'll lead." Elena felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her, like a promise and a threat wrapped into one. She didn't know how to feel about that. She didn't know how to feel about anything anymore. All she knew was that the life she had known was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She looked at Dante, seeing him for the first time not just as the man who had dragged her into this world, but as someone who truly believed she belonged in it. She had no idea what her future held, but one thing was clear: it was no longer hers to control. The days following that moment in the study were a blur. Elena couldn't escape the weight of what she had learned, nor the pull of the world Dante was insisting she belonged to. Every step she took felt like a step further into a life she had never asked for. It was as if the man had already decided everything for her, and she was now just along for the ride. The mansion had become a cage, its walls closing in around her with every passing hour. Dante was everywhere. His presence was constant, like a shadow that never left her side. He had promised her time to adjust, but every time she thought she might breathe a little easier, he was there again, pushing her closer to a life she wasn't sure she wanted. She spent her days in the mansion, walking its grand halls, trying to convince herself that there was still something of her old life left to grasp. But the more she tried to hold on, the more the pieces slipped away. The family she had known, the career she had worked for, it all felt so far away now. Dante had been right about one thing. Her life was no longer hers to control. One afternoon, as she wandered through the massive library of the mansion, Elena found herself standing before another door. This one smaller, more unassuming than the others, but it called to her in a way she couldn't ignore. She reached for the handle and turned it, stepping into the room without thinking. Inside, the space was dim, the only light coming from a single lamp on a wooden desk. The room felt oddly familiar, but she couldn't place why. As she looked around, her eyes fell on a picture frame on the desk. It was an old black and white photograph, and it was the only thing on the desk. Curiosity pulled her closer, and she reached for the frame. As her fingers touched the glass, she saw it. A picture of a man she didn't recognize at first, but then it clicked. It was her father, the same man who had been labeled a construction worker, the man who had raised her. But this photo told a different story. She was standing next to him in the picture, but it wasn't just any photo. The man next to her had a strong presence, like Dante's. He was dressed in a dark suit, and his eyes were cold, calculating. And her father, he wasn't the man she remembered. This man, her father, was someone else entirely. Elena's hand trembled as she set the photo back down. Her thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it. How had Dante known about all of this? How had he known about this hidden part of her father's life? And why had he kept it from her? The door behind her creaked open, and Elena froze. Dante's voice came from the doorway, calm as always, but this time there was something else in it. Something that sent a shiver down her spine. "You shouldn't be here, Elena," he said, his eyes narrowing as he crossed the room toward her. Elena stood still, unable to move, the photograph still fresh in her mind. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What did you mean by this?" Dante paused, his gaze fixed on the photo before meeting her eyes. "It's part of the truth, Elena. The part you need to understand. Your father wasn't just an ordinary man. He was involved in something far bigger than you could ever imagine. And that picture," he gestured to the frame, "is a reminder of that." Elena shook her head. "No, my father was just a regular man. He worked hard, he loved me. He wasn't this. I don't understand." Dante's eyes softened for a moment, but there was no warmth in his expression. "He was protecting you from this world. The world you were always meant to be a part of. The world of the Moretti family." Elena stepped back, her mind racing as the walls of the mansion seemed to close in tighter around her. She was suffocating. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice almost desperate. "Why couldn't you just let me have my life? Why did you have to drag me into this?" Dante's expression hardened again. "Because it wasn't your choice, Elena. It was never your choice. Your father made sure you were kept in the dark, but I can't let you stay there any longer. You are part of this world, and it's time for you to face it." Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. Her heart was pounding, and she was struggling to keep her composure. "I don't belong here," she whispered, more to herself than to Dante. "I don't want this life. I don't want any of it." Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't have to want it, Elena," he said softly, his voice almost comforting. "But you need to accept it. Your place in this world is already decided. You belong to me, and nothing you do will change that." His words hit her like a physical blow, and she stumbled back, her head spinning. She wanted to fight, wanted to scream, but she couldn't. There was nothing she could do to change what was happening. This was her life now, whether she wanted it or not. And there was no turning back. Elena's mind was racing as Dante's words echoed in her ears. She felt like she was trapped in a nightmare, one that she couldn't wake up from. His claim that she belonged to him, that her life was no longer her own, hit her with a force she wasn't prepared for. She had always been independent, always in control of her own future. But now, standing in this mansion, surrounded by a world she didn't understand, she felt like everything she had ever known was slipping away. Dante was still watching her, his presence overwhelming, his gaze never leaving hers. She wanted to push him away, wanted to scream at him to leave her alone, but something in his eyes, something she couldn't explain, kept her rooted in place. "What do you want from me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's expression softened, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to accept what you are, Elena. You're part of this world, whether you want to be or not. You've always been part of it. Your father, he made sure you were kept away from it for as long as possible. But now, it's time for you to step into your rightful place." Elena shook her head, her thoughts spinning. "I don't belong in this world, Dante. I don't want any part of it. I was fine before you came into my life." Dante's lips curled into a small, almost sad smile. "You were never fine, Elena. You were living a lie, a life that was never meant for you. You were meant to lead, to rule, and now it's time for you to remember that. I've brought you here to show you the truth." His words were like a punch to the gut, and Elena felt her breath catch. She had never felt more powerless in her life. "I don't want to remember," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want this life, this world, whatever you're trying to force me into. I just want to be left alone." Dante stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "You can't run from this, Elena. It's in your blood. You've always known it. Your father's blood runs through your veins, and with it comes a legacy you can't escape." Elena backed away, her chest tightening. "I don't want it. I didn't ask for it." "I didn't ask for it either," Dante said softly, his voice tinged with something like regret. "But it's our reality, Elena. The moment you were born, Your life was set in motion. And now, you need to embrace that. You need to learn to accept who you truly are. She felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't accept this. Dante's expression softened slightly, but his eyes still held that intense, unyielding gaze. You don't have to accept it all at once, he said. But you will. In time. And when you do, you'll understand why I've done this. Why I had to find you. You're the one who will carry on the legacy. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away. I'm not my father, she said, her voice barely audible. I don't want to be part of this world. I don't want to hurt anyone, or be like you. Dante's face darkened, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes, something fierce, something dangerous. You won't hurt anyone, Elena, he said quietly. You will protect what's yours. You will protect this world and the people in it. And when the time comes, you'll understand why that's necessary. Elena recoiled, her heart racing in her chest. I don't want to protect this world. I want to leave. I want to go back to the life I had. Dante's voice was calm, but firm as he spoke. That life is gone. You can't go back, Elena. This is your reality now, and you will learn to live in it, or it will consume you. The words struck her like a physical blow, and she stumbled backward, feeling dizzy. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I can't do this. Dante stepped forward, his hands reaching out to steady her. Yes, you can, he said softly. You were born for this. You have the strength to carry it. You just have to remember. Elena felt the weight of his words settle over her, but she couldn't bring herself to believe them. She couldn't accept this world, this destiny he was offering her. She had wanted a normal life, a life where she could help people and make a difference. But now, everything felt like a lie. She was trapped in a world she never wanted, and there was no way out. Dante seemed to sense her inner turmoil, and he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I know this is hard, he said, his voice quieter now. But you're not alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. And together, we'll make sure you're ready for what comes next. Elena closed her eyes, her mind swirling with confusion and fear. She didn't know if she could do this, if she could live up to whatever destiny Dante was pushing her toward. But deep down, she knew that she had no choice. This was her life now, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Elena. She tried to fight it, tried to deny everything Dante had said, but the more time she spent in his world, the harder it became to ignore the truth. She was part of it now, whether she liked it or not. The mansion had become her new reality, and as much as she wanted to escape, there was no place for her to go. Every time she thought about leaving, something deep inside her, something she couldn't quite explain, kept her rooted in place. Dante's presence was a constant, looming over her, guiding her in ways she couldn't understand. She spent her days in the grand, empty halls of the mansion, walking aimlessly, trying to make sense of the world around her. Nothing felt real anymore. Everything was a blur, and the life she had known seemed like a distant memory. She couldn't remember what it was like to be free, to make her own choices. Now, every decision was made for her. She couldn't even decide what to eat without Dante's influence. He was always there, always watching, always pushing her closer to something she wasn't ready for. One evening, as she sat in the mansion's expansive library, her eyes scanned the countless bookshelves that lined the walls. There was no one else around, just the silence of the house, the soft ticking of a clock on the far wall, and the weight of everything Dante had told her. She picked up a book, one she had been meaning to read, but her mind couldn't focus on it. She was too lost in her thoughts, too consumed by the reality Dante had placed her in. The more she thought about it, the more her heart raced. She wasn't meant to be here. She had never wanted any of this. She had wanted a simple life, a life where she could make a difference in people's lives, not be a pawn in some dangerous game. But that wasn't her reality anymore. Her reality was a life of power, control, and manipulation. A life where every move she made was calculated, where she had to learn to play the game or get lost. A sudden knock on the door startled her, and she quickly stood up, brushing her hands off as if trying to erase the thoughts from her mind. Dante stepped into the room, his presence as commanding as ever. Are you ready? He asked, his voice steady, though there was an edge to it. Elena looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no choice, no way out. She had tried to resist, tried to push him away, but she knew, deep down, that it was futile. He had already claimed her, already made her a part of this world, and there was no going back. She took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. Ready for what? Dante's lips curved into a small, almost sad smile. For what comes next, he said, stepping closer. You can't stay hidden forever, Elena. It's time to accept your place. The time has come for you to embrace your future, your destiny. She felt a knot form in her stomach. She had heard those words too many times, but this time, they didn't feel comforting. They felt like a weight she couldn't carry. I'm not ready, she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Dante's gaze softened, but there was no pity in it, no sympathy. I know you're not, he said gently, but you will be. In time. The world is waiting for you, Elena, and you have to be ready to face it. His words were like a challenge, like a test she couldn't fail. She knew that whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. She would have to learn to accept the life Dante had forced upon her. And for the first time, Elena wondered if she could ever really escape. Dante turned toward the door, pausing for a moment before speaking again. Come, he said. The others are waiting. Elena's heart raced as she followed him through the mansion's dark corridors. She didn't know where they were going or what was about to happen, but she knew it was the moment she had been dreading. The moment when she would have to make a choice. She couldn't stay here forever, couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. The world Dante was offering her was dangerous, full of secrets and lies, and she wasn't sure if she could survive it. But she had no choice. She had been pulled into this world, and now she had to learn how to navigate it. As they reached the end of the hall, Dante opened a door and gestured for Elena to enter. Inside, a group of men sat around a large table, their eyes lifting as she entered the room. Elena's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment she had feared. Dante stepped forward, his hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance. This is your world now, he said quietly, and you will learn how to lead it. Elena looked around at the faces of the men in the room. They were all staring at her, waiting for her to make her move. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized that, in that moment, everything had changed. She had no idea how she was supposed to lead, how she was supposed to survive in this world. But one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Elena's heart was racing as she stepped into the room, the weight of the moment sinking in. The men sitting around the large table in front of her were no strangers to power, each one exuding an aura of control and authority. They were the men who ran this world, the men who dictated the rules, and she was standing right in front of them, a part of their dangerous game. Dante stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor amidst the overwhelming chaos swirling in her mind. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent gesture that both comforted and trapped her. This is where you'll learn what it means to lead. Dante's voice broke through the silence, smooth and calm as always. Elena's breath caught in her throat, the intensity of the situation almost too much to bear. She had always considered herself an outsider in the world Dante had pulled her into, but now, it seemed as though that world was hers. These men, the faces staring at her with cold, calculating eyes, were now her responsibility. She had no idea how to lead them, how to even begin to understand the complexity of the world she had been thrust into. But one thing was clear. The moment she had stepped into this room, her life had changed forever. Dante turned to face the men, his voice commanding their attention. Elena is the future, he said, his tone unwavering. She is the one who will carry on the Moretti legacy, and it is time for her to take her place among us. You will show her what she needs to know, and you will respect her as you respect me. The men nodded in unison, their eyes flicking briefly to Elena before returning to Dante. She could feel their judgment, their assessment of her, and it made her stomach turn. They saw her as a tool, a means to an end, nothing more than a woman who would carry on the family name. But Elena was more than that. She had to be. Dante, for all his power, had given her a chance to prove herself, a chance to change her fate. Elena, one of the men spoke up, his voice deep and gravelly. You are about to enter a world where trust is everything. You cannot afford to be weak, to show fear. If you do, you will be consumed. We will teach you what you need to know, but remember, there is no room for mistakes. Elena's mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? This world was ruthless, and she knew it. But she also knew that she couldn't back out now. She had no choice but to accept this new reality. I understand, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The man gave a slight nod before continuing. Good. We start with the basics. This is not just about money or power, Elena. This is about survival. You need to understand who your enemies are and who your allies are. And, above all, you need to understand that there are no second chances in our world. One mistake, and it could cost you everything. Elena swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had no idea what the future held, but she could feel the gravity of the situation bearing down on her. She wasn't just learning the ropes. She was being thrust into the heart of a world where survival meant more than anything else. Another man at the table spoke, his voice sharp and direct. Your father's legacy is what you carry now. You must protect it. The Moretti name is powerful, but it's also vulnerable. Many will try to tear it down. You need to be prepared. Elena's chest tightened at the mention of her father. She hadn't known him as the man these men spoke of. He had been a quiet, reserved man, a man who had kept his past hidden from her. But now, she was learning the truth. She was the one who had to carry the weight of the Moretti name, a name tied to power, to crime, to a legacy of both greatness and destruction. You don't have to be like us, Dante said, his voice suddenly softer as he turned to face her. But you must understand us. You must understand what we stand for. And when you do, you will be ready to take control of this world. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. Could she really do this? Could she become the leader they expected her to be? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back. She had been pulled into this world, and it was now hers to navigate. Dante's hand on her shoulder tightened slightly, a silent reminder of his control over her life. This is your future, Elena, he said quietly, and I will be here every step of the way to help you find your place in it. The room was silent as the weight of his words settled over her. Elena didn't know if she was ready for this, if she could ever accept the role they wanted her to play. But she knew one thing. The path ahead was uncertain, and there was no turning back. The Moretti world had claimed her, and she had no choice but to learn how to survive in it. Elena stood at the edge of the grand balcony, her eyes scanning the sprawling city below her. The lights of New York City flickered like distant stars, each one a reminder of the life she had once known, a life that now seemed so far removed from the world she was now a part of. The weight of her new life hung heavy on her shoulders, a burden she had never asked for but was now forced to carry. Dante had always said she was meant for this, meant to lead the Moretti legacy, but Elena still struggled to believe it. She had tried to deny it, tried to convince herself that there was a way out, but every day spent in the mansion, surrounded by men who revered her as their leader, made it clearer that there was no escape. Her life, her destiny, had been decided for her long before she had any say in it. The months had passed quickly, each one bringing her closer to understanding the world Dante had pulled her into. She had learned the rules of the game, the delicate balance of power that kept everything in motion. She had learned to make decisions, to command respect, to stand firm in the face of threats. The lessons were harsh, but they were necessary. And through it all, Dante had been by her side, guiding her, teaching her, sometimes pushing her to places she never thought she would go. But there were moments when Elena wondered if she was losing herself in the process. She had always been a kind and compassionate person, someone who cared deeply about the people she helped, but in this world, kindness was a weakness. Compassion was something to be used, not felt. The Moretti world demanded loyalty, power, and control, and she had learned to give it. The woman she had once been seemed like a distant memory now. As she stood on the balcony, lost in thought, Dante approached her quietly. She hadn't heard him coming, but she wasn't surprised. He always seemed to know where she was, always aware of her presence, always a step ahead. You're ready, Dante said softly, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the air between them. Elena didn't look at him. She couldn't. Not now, not when she was so uncertain. Am I? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been ready since the day I found you, he replied, his tone steady, unwavering. This world has been waiting for you, Elena. You've learned everything you need to know. It's time to take your place. She finally turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. Dante's eyes softened, but there was no pity in them, only understanding. You already are, he said. You've made choices, difficult choices. You've learned to lead, to command, to protect what's yours. The world sees you as their leader, Elena. It's time for you to see yourself that way too. Elena felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest. The doubt, the fear, the uncertainty, it all seemed to come crashing down on her in that moment. She had fought it for so long, but now, standing before Dante, she realized there was no more running. She had become the person they all expected her to be. And whether she was ready or not, this was her life now. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady herself. When she opened them again, she met Dante's gaze with a newfound resolve. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady, strong. Dante smiled, his face lighting up with approval. I knew you would be. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. The Moretti legacy is yours now, Elena, and you will protect it. You will lead it into the future with strength, with power, with determination. The world is yours to command. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a cloak. This was her future now. There was no turning back. She had accepted it. The decisions would be hers to make, the power hers to wield. And as much as she had feared this moment, as much as she had fought against it, she now realized that this was where she was meant to be. The woman she had been was gone, but the woman she had become was something entirely new. And she would no longer question her place in this world. Elena Harper was the new queen of the Moretti family, and nothing, not even her own doubts, would take that away from her. In this gripping dark romance, Elena's life is turned upside down when she is drawn into a world of power, control, and danger. Once living a simple life as a therapist, she is pulled into the dark underworld of the Moretti family, where her bloodline connects her to an unimaginable legacy. As Elena is forced to confront her past and her true identity, she must learn how to survive in a world where survival means embracing darkness. Dante, the mysterious and powerful Mafia boss, guides her through this treacherous world, making Elena question everything she once believed about herself. This dark romance explores the complexities of trust, power, and the bonds that can both save and destroy. As Elena struggles to accept her fate, she finds herself trapped between her desires and the brutal reality of the life Dante has chosen for her. With every step she takes, the pull of this dark romance grows stronger, making her realize that she cannot escape the life waiting for her. The world she's been thrust into is not one of her choosing, but it's one that's now inescapable. In this dark romance, Elena must confront her fears, her past, and the man who holds the keys to her destiny. The stakes are high, and the choices she makes could change everything. Will she embrace her dark destiny, or will she fight to reclaim her life? This dark romance is a journey of self-discovery, power, and survival in a world that tests everything Elena thought she knew about herself.